Hello, it's Debbie Gilbert here from the Best Business Women Awards, and I'm the podcast host of the Business Awards show. So, welcome today to Rachel Dunford, the Impact Specialist, and we're going to find out more about what that actually is because I'm sure you're already thinking, hmm, what's an impact specialist? So I'm going to be finding that out from Rachel. Um, Rachel has had her business now for almost 13 years. It came about as a result of a redundancy. And so we'll find out about her business journey in a moment. And she has just walked away with 2 awards from the Best Businesswomen Awards last year for Businesswoman of the Decade, which is an amazing attribute to have, and business services. So she walked away with 2 silvers, and the previous year was awarded a Golden Peacock Award, which we'll talk more about that later. So welcome, Rachel.
Hello, thank you so much, Debbie. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's lovely to have you. So let's start off by the business journey because it's one of the things that our listeners love to know about, and me
Mhm.
too, because I'm a bit nosy. So you were made redundant over
That's,
13 years ago, and
yeah.
then you decided to set up this business. So talk a bit about what you were doing before you got made redundant, and also what made you start up a business in quite a niche sector, really.
Okay. Yeah. So I had a brilliant job running a massive program designed to try and get young people back into education, employment, and training, managing multi-million-pound budgets, but trying to test out different ways of encouraging young people to get back into a um, positive place in their life. And then I was also pregnant with my first child. And then sort of disaster struck when I was 8 months pregnant. I was made redundant.
Mm.
My job didn't exist anymore, and I suddenly was facing a bit of a sort of cliff face, if you like, where I had nothing to go back to after my maternity pay, and I didn't even have any maternity settlement available to me. It was pretty horrible. I had to go and get a lawyer with 2 other colleagues who were also pregnant, and we had to really fight our corner. We did eventually get to an agreement, but it was just a really traumatizing time. And I think it's a point when you're so vulnerable because it's also new. You don't know what life is going to be like with a newborn. And the last thing you need to worry about is where your income's coming from. And it was horrid. But do you know what? On reflection, I think it could have been the best thing that could have happened to me because we lived in Bedford at the time and my job was in London. And the idea of getting on a train and commuting again after having had my baby was just terrifying. I didn't want to be that far away from her. And with my husband working away as well, it just didn't feel like it would have worked. So, whilst it was horrible, I think I have to count my blessings and say it was the right thing. And I just sort of went, okay, I'll be self-employed. So I had begun my career a few years before that as a management consultant, trained as a management consultant. So my first few years when I was self-employed was spent kind of doing a mini management consultancy kind of business, taking on any project I could find through my old network, just so that I could be earning in a way that allowed me to be around for my daughter. And responsible for her and responsive to what she needed from me. As that went on, I started finding that I was getting more and more research and evaluation kind of projects. So I spent perhaps about a decade running evaluations for different people. And that would mean that I was employed by a funder who was paying money for a program, an initiative, or some sort of training. And it was often public sector money being used. And my job was, as a completely independent person, to look at how well that program had delivered. Has it been successful? Has it achieved the things it was set out to do? Has the funders' money been used in the right way? And if not, why not? Why was it particularly successful? What could you learn from that? Or why were things not working so well? And what could they do to improve effectiveness or efficiency? And so I became really skilled at looking for evidence and looking to see what impact various different programs and projects were having. I then kind of realized that there was a little bit of a gap. And there still kind of continues to be a bit of a gap in the market because people weren't really making the connection between impact and business so much. it was a kind of assumed thing that if you were spending public money, you'd needed to justify how well that was being used, if it was being spent in the right way, and if it was being used effectively. But looking at the impact of things that businesses do, wasn't something that people were talking about that at that point. And so I thought, you know what, I'd like to be able to equip business owners with the skills they need to be confident about their impact, to know what it means to have an impact, to find a way of measuring it and to prove it, to have a way of talking about it publicly, and then having a way of using that information so that they can transform their businesses, so they can market themselves better, so they can explain to their clients what they can expect from their services, so they understand if the things they're doing are working well. And so that's kind of brought me to where I am now. And I talk about myself as being the impact specialist. And I spent the last 2, 3 years doing just that, focusing almost entirely on impact.
Oh, so talk me through how you work with a business on
Mhm.
this area. So, how
Okay.
would you even start to measure the impact?
That's a great question. And I think it sort of comes back to the fact that what I see a lot when I talk to businesses about impact is that people are really comfortable talking about their impact in terms of numbers. So
Mm.
I had a brilliant encounter with a gentleman who ran this massive STEM outreach program in schools. So he was running brilliant activities for young people to do with science, technology, engineering, and maths. And he showed me his impact report, and it was stacked full with numbers. He was saying how many sessions he'd run over the course of an academic year, how many young people he'd reached and where they were in the country and what their demographics were, how many volunteers he had delivering these things. But there was nothing beyond that. And whilst those figures were really helpful in terms of understanding the scale of what he was doing, I had to say, so what? So what changed for the young people that were taking part? Because in my view, I think quality matters over quantity. And if you can deliver one session where you really inspire a group of young people and you change their minds about what their future might look like, you help them to see that a career in engineering might be something that's within reach for them and they never had that idea beforehand. Or if you can help them find a love for a subject they didn't have before, you are making a real impact. And it doesn't matter necessarily, I mean, it does in the bigger picture, but in that moment, it doesn't matter whether the volume of people in the room whose lives you're changing is 1 or 100. If you're making a positive change to somebody, you're having an impact. Of course, scale matters. And so for him, when I actually persuaded him to do some impact measurement work with me, and we spent a year working together, I could help him have an evidence base that added to those numbers. So then he had a way of saying to his bosses afterwards, let's continue to make this investment. It matters. We are changing young people's lives. We could prove that we were raising aspirations, giving people a potential career path in the future, helping them re-engage in education, all kinds of things that prior to that he wasn't able to prove. It's given him evidence for justifying the future sustainability of the program. What I love to do for people is help them to measure what feels unmeasurable. And that's those kind of intangible changes. Because he said to me at the time, do you know what, Rachel, you can't prove those things. You can't prove those changes. And I said, but you can. And so by using all kinds of qualitative research techniques, so I run surveys, I do interviews, I do observations of activities, I run focus groups, I speak to as many different stakeholders as possible. And largely, you kind of illustrate impact by using storytelling or narrative or talking about people's stories or journeys, because that's what makes it kind of understandable to a new audience. If you can show a family that a young person has completely changed their outlook as a result of taking part in these STEM sessions, for example, you can see that that would be translatable to other contexts, other schools, other families, all kinds of things. And so it all depends on sort of what a client wants to achieve with me, but we start by understanding what change they hope to create for their clients, for their stakeholders. And then I would design research activities that allow me to look for evidence of those changes taking place. And then I run that research, and then I analyze the data and report for them so they can say, now I have a really robust way of proving the impact of the things that I do for my clients.
So the work you're doing really is something a business can use as part of their sales tools, part of their sales
Absolutely.
toolkit.
Absolutely.
And it goes far, far beyond getting reviews and testimonials. This is very deep-seated research, isn't it? Really getting into the mindset of the clients and understanding, the work that this business is doing, what impact their work is having on their clients. So you're really taking a deep dive into that business, aren't you? Into those
That's it.
clients' mindset.
And what I really love to do is kind of help people to solve a business problem by putting impact for kind of center of the conversation. So if I reflect on some of the projects I've done in the last year or so, I've helped organizations to improve their staff morale and their team kind of work ethic, because I've gone into an organization and I've helped everybody from the chief executive down to the facilities manager, in terms of the different roles that they might be playing, to understand how their contribution adds up to achieve the overall objectives of the business. I started this sort of day's workshop with this team of people saying, right, I'd like you to show me where your job maps onto these corporate objectives. And they were like, oh, no, that's nothing to do with me. That's that department. But what I allowed them to do was to really stop and sort of challenge their own thinking and see that I don't mind if you are on a whatever salary as a chief executive or whatever as somebody else. You are playing a really crucial role because you have an impact on something within the business, which then goes on and, cumulatively it increases and it works together to create whatever it is your business is setting out to achieve. And so what we did was really help this organization to kind of re-energize, reinvigorate their staff, because everybody suddenly went, I do have a role to play. Oh, I can see how I fit with this part of the business. So that's one example. Or I can help people kind of determine whether their services are fit for purpose. Are the things you're offering exactly what your clients need? Or are you just assuming that's what people want and need and not really checking? And are you kind of finding that your clients are using your services as you intend? Or is there something you're putting all of your energies into, but that nobody really accesses or makes use of? For example, if you run a membership and we're putting tons and tons of energy into creating, I don't know, a series of masterclasses that are in a kind of repository, but they never get used, that doesn't feel like a really good use of your energy, time, and resources. And you perhaps might be more better placed to think about delivering that content in a different way. So I help people reflect on the way they deliver their businesses. And I help them kind of make decisions about things to stop or things to change or things to do more of, because I give them evidence that allows them to go, this makes sense. I thought I had a hunch that this was being used like that, but actually it's not true. I have the evidence now. I can really make a decision about how to take my business forward because I've got evidence of our impact. There's loads of different places where impact can really be
Mm.
transformative, impact evidence.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. And as someone who runs an awards program, one of the things we see a lot is the entries that come in just don't have enough evidence to back up the claims that are made. So,
Mhm.
from everything you're saying, some of the work you do, this could be put into an award entry, even.
Well, it's actually true from my own experience, because I was really conscious that when I applied to the awards that I've tried, the two that you mentioned earlier on, I really wanted to be able to substantiate the things I said to you guys, because I didn't just want to say I am the best at such and such or I'm brilliant at this without being able to prove it, because I see in a very crowded marketplace, there's so many different businesses that exist everywhere. There's a business for everything, and people make quite outlandish claims at times, don't they? And for me, I really want to be able to be credible and to be known for doing a good job and for being trustworthy. And I think evidence of impact allows you to do that. But you're absolutely spot on. When you are applying for awards, without really good quality evidence of your impact, your award isn't really going to stand out. Because if you have a way of demonstrating that what you do is really effective, talking about the transformations that you've enabled for your clients, the difference you've made to somebody's life, the way that you've taken somebody from a place of total darkness to a place of complete light, it doesn't matter what business you're in. If you can prove that change has taken place because of you, you're standing yourself apart from any competition, I think.
Yeah. No, and I think you're right. I can really see how the work you're doing could also be useful for award entries, as well as all the other things, getting new clients, but also assessing generally the pathway that your business is going.
Definitely.
Because, sometimes you're absolutely right. People go off on a pathway in their business because that's what they think. is the right pathway and it's not necessarily what their customers actually want or need. So I
Precisely.
love
And
that.
what you like to do or what you enjoy doing, you
Mhm.
hope is what your clients want from you. And it's not always
No,
true, is it? Yeah.
no.
Mm.
So let's go back to 2023
Hmm.
when you were part of a program with Emphas Maloney, who's been on the
That's right.
podcast. Actually, she's one of the only guests we've had on twice.
I saw that.
Yeah. And she runs a sales program. So you were part of her membership, and she ran some awards, didn't she, at the end of
Right.
her first year? So talk me through, because it was an entry process, it was judged. So talk me through what made you enter that, because that was the first time really that you'd sort of dipped your toe into the awards waters, so to speak.
Yeah, and I'd been in business for a long time, really,
Mm.
relatively by that point, hadn't I? I think, do you know what? I had spent, I mean, it's part of lots of things actually, but I spent so much of the first 8, 9 years of my self-employment being on my own, kind of assuming a bit sillily, really, on reflection, that nobody else really worked by themselves. Nobody worked in the same way that I did. Being self-employed was unusual at that point, so nobody else would understand or could help me. And then I met Envis and I realized that was quite naive of me, and that actually external people can offer such a super perspective and help you with things that you are not good at. Because historically, I was superb at the content and the thing that I did, but terrified of selling. And she really helped me unblock that and gave me a completely new perspective on how I might approach that in terms of finding finding work that was right for me,
Mm.
and being confident about my offer and finding the right clients. And so yes, I did her sales training program, and then she introduced her awards program, and I was terrified, and I waited till the last minute. I know I did, and I did it eventually, and I made my application, and I kind of assumed that I wouldn't get anywhere because one of my biggest faults is being very self-deprecating, which is not a helpful attribute to have, but it's just who I am. And I just made the assumption, which turned out to be wrong, that I didn't have anything that would stand out. But actually, I was awarded the Trailblazer Award, which is the final one of the night. I also, during the ceremony, I'll tell you that I'd kind of assumed, oh, I've not heard my name, it's not happening, I'm not going to win anything. And then when I was chosen at that last award, gosh, I was so overwhelmed. It was such a wonderful feeling to get
Mhm.
external recognition of, I can't do my maths very quickly, but it must be almost a decade at that point, pushing it, over a decade of hard work, toil,
Yeah.
tears, a lot, a bit of swearing probably at times, loneliness for a lot of it, but to have that kind of determination and that grit recognized, and that, the business that I was running was worthy of an award, was just the nicest thing. And I could not wait to tell my mum and my husband and my friends, and I was just so overwhelmed. But I realized that actually it was a really valuable thing for my business, because once I told the people that I love, and I kind of spoke about it publicly on LinkedIn, for example, my gosh, was I overwhelmed by the response I got. People were so lovely, and just, I think that was a sort of second level of recognition. People were just saying, wow, what an amazing achievement. And that was just totally unexpected as well. And I think um, you need those moments when you're self-employed, don't you? You need some way, because you don't have an HR department to do your appraisal. You don't have
Yeah.
anybody giving you like a raise at the end of the year, because you're in charge of that, and you probably spent half of it on your coaching and your printer ink. So you kind of need
Mm.
something to boost you and to kind of remind you that you're doing a good job, and that what you're, do as I say, not as I do. I'm always talking about getting evidence of your impact. And I guess this is one way of doing that, isn't it? So
Mm.
having that recognition externally. And do you know what? The process of those awards being given was meant a lot to me as well, because I knew that it was independently judged, and it wasn't Envis choosing the people that she loved the most. It was about somebody independently reviewing those applications and going, no, this is the person who's worthy of this award, etc. That meant such a lot as well. And so that kind of gave me a bit of confidence to enter the Best Businesswoman Awards, because I had watched from the sidelines the previous year. I'd gone to the launch and I had intended to apply, and I chickened out, and I just didn't have the confidence, and I didn't, and I missed the boat. And I feel silly now, having realized, actually, do you know what? It doesn't matter how far you go, just the process of trying is so important.
I don't think you should feel silly because you probably then decided to do the Golden Peacocks.
Yeah,
And that gave you the confidence you needed, I think, to propel you forward. And actually, to jump from that to a national award is a pretty big jump, to be honest,
that's the point.
because you could have gone for, say, SME Bedfordshire Awards, which is much
Hmm.
smaller.
Hmm.
Um, or there are some other there's other sort of more localized awards, but you went for it feet first, and I
Yeah.
think that's amazing.
Well,
And you did
hilariously, I did. And then I entered two categories in your
that.
award in this. And honestly, do you know what, Debbie? I was sitting on the floor in the living room one evening, and an email came up and went, "Congratulations, you've been shortlisted as a finalist." And it was for business services. I don't mind admitting, I screamed, threw my phone across the room. I then swore quite a bit, and my children and husband were like, "What's going on? What's the matter with this woman?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, look, I've been shortlisted in the best business and business services category." So we all cried a bit. We all got a bit excited. I sat down, and then a few minutes later, I got another email, and it said, "You've been shortlisted in the Businesswoman of the Decade category," and it makes me emotional again. Blimey, that was just like such a special thing.
We got a lot of entries for that
Did
particular
you?
category.
Did
Yeah,
you?
it was the first year we'd run anything like that. I mean, we've morphed it for this year to lifetime achievement. We
Hmm.
called it Businesswoman of the Decade because we'd been running for 10 years ourselves. So that's what the whole purpose of it was to recognise women who'd run a business for 10 years or more, which obviously you well fitted the criteria. And it was highly contested. And the judges absolutely loved you, absolutely loved what you're doing. And so you should feel really proud because I think there was actually four judges on that category in the end. We have a minimum of three, but I'm pretty sure I had to put four on that. So, that you must feel so proud because
Oh,
that's
just so proud, and that moment, that evening when I'm throwing my phone around and crying and swearing and looking like a bit of a mess, just will stay with me. And I was so, so proud. And then when we came to having the ceremony, I felt like a
amazing.
princess. I felt like a superstar. I was with my husband and we were dressed up and looked all posh and proper. And we stayed in a lovely hotel. And it was such a wonderful night. And walking up onto the stage next to those brilliant women, it's just amazing. Honestly, one of my favorite memories of all time.
Oh, well, that's
You
amazing. And I
can see
think,
them there. Look, you can see them on my cabinet right behind me.
oh, yes, look,
Pride of place.
proudly displayed. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So let's think about the impact that's had on your business.
Yeah,
Let's talk about that. So has it had these awards? Have they had an impact on your business?
definitely they have. As I said, when I had the Golden Peacock Award, just seeing the response when I talked about it publicly really surprised me because I was a bit kind of cautious. I didn't want to show off. I didn't want to appear to be cocky about, something that I'd have achieved. But then I realized that was a total nonsense. And people love to share your success. And I think, well, I love to see other people
Mm.
succeed. And it's true in the other direction too, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just the response by my network was just overwhelming. I got some incredible press coverage because I've started last year. I started working with Amanda Fitzgerald on a PR strategy, and she taught me. And I also loved the interview that you guys did together about using your awards to make some positive stories. And I was just so chuffed to be able to
Mm.
share my success in that way. It was celebrated locally. It was celebrated in all kinds of different places, and it's just allowed me to build my credibility. People respect what I do in a different way, but I feel empowered as well. I feel like because a set of independent judges had looked at, as you say now, numerous applications and chosen mine
Mm.
because it stood out in some way, just allows me to walk taller, to speak a
Mm.
bit more confidently, to feel prouder, to feel differently about my work. And it's really interesting. In the olden days of being self-employed, when I started out, I would be really well, very self-deprecating about it. I just, do some stuff at home. I work from home. I just, because my husband has a very recognizable profession. He's a TV producer, so people understand that very quickly. And I found it too complicated to explain what I did for myself. But now that I've started getting recognition for my work in this way, I talk about myself as running a business, and that's a complete shift in my mindset. And when you
Yeah.
change your mindset, it changes how you portray yourself, and then how people
Mm.
perceive you. And then it just allows me to kind of own the things I'm good at. I mean, there are still things that we can improve on over here, definitely lots of that. But I know that the work I do is different, it's
Mm.
needed, it's valuable, and it's recognized by, very credible external people. And that's allowed me to do wonders with, getting places to speak, having press coverage, as I said, attracting different clients, all kinds of things that I wouldn't have done otherwise. I just wouldn't have dared. Um, and I'm thinking I need to come to the next launch again.
Well, I think it makes you feel validated. I think that's what it did
Definitely.
for me when I won my first award back in 2012. I'd have been in business at that point since 98, so a long time. But I think it's a similar sort of trajectory to you, really. And I think it suddenly made me feel like, well, yeah, I wasn't just this person running this little business. I was actually doing something great. And I think it's that validation
Mhm.
that is what will be your propeller that will push you forwards, I think.
I think so.
So let's talk about, obviously, you've had a 13-year business journey, so very long time now. And our listeners are a real mixed bag of people on their startup journey. Some people are very well established. So there's always nuggets to share, golden nuggets of wisdom. So, what would your wisdom of the last 13 years be
Yeah.
to share with everybody else?
Okay. Don't do as I do, and don't take so long to ask for help.
Ah, that's a good one.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, like I genuinely spent so much of that first 8, 9 years
long time.
just surviving by myself. It never occurred to me to look outside for support. It never occurred to me to invest in my own professional development in those first few years. I mean, in the first instance, I wasn't financially able to do so, but the truth is, I just didn't even think about it. And then, as I started to be a bit more outward looking, I realized that there were loads of places I could learn from. And it's ironic because I spent a long time evaluating education and training kind of programs. And you'd think that there might have been a kind of light bulb in my head a bit sooner than this, but doesn't matter because it happened eventually. And I think there is absolutely, you never stop learning. So always think about who might be able to help you move forward. But then I'd also say, make good decisions about who you invest in to support you. You can see from my journey that, investing in NBIS support, for example, was a really positive choice to make. But prior to meeting NBIS, I nearly made a really bad choice investing in somebody who had perhaps a similar sort of service,
Mm.
but ironically was making some very bold claims about the transformations they could create. But we just didn't see the evidence of that. My husband was the one who kind of stopped me from making the investment because he was like, how do we know that they can do this for your business if they can't
Mm.
prove it? And so I'd say, do ask for help, but think
Mm.
carefully about who you choose to ask you because, your time and your money is really precious. And as a self-employed person, you hopefully want to spend once and spend wisely and spend right rather than having to kind of pay for things more than once. It's not to say you won't make mistakes, but I just would say take your time in choosing the people that you want to have in your world. But also I'd say find your tribe because
Yeah.
I think another thing that has really boosted my self-confidence is looking outwards, going, not just staying in the house, working at home, which I did for a very long time. And I've made excuses about not being able to go anywhere because of the kids. It stopped being true when they stopped being so tiny. But as soon as I started going to in-person things, meeting tends to be female business owners, I just find this wave of support and strength from them because whilst they may not do the same thing for a living, they understand, they empathize, they will help you solve a problem because they've had it already and they'll point you in the right direction. They will champion you, they will support you, they'll promote your business. So there are so many wonderful places you can do this, but I would say, find your tribe, look after them, and they will look after you too.
Yeah, so what I'm really hearing from you, it is about help and support. So, as in calling out for help, but also getting into a networking group or a mastermind group or something like that to help
Mhm.
support you. And that's really powered you through, which is
Definitely.
fabulous. And look at where you are now.
No,
Amazing.
it's mad, isn't it? Still going after 13 years.
Brilliant. And what have you got sort of on the plans for this year? What's going to be happening for the impact specialist?
Well, I am hoping to do more consultancy and coaching based work this year because I've had projects over the last 2 years in a kind of piecemeal basis where I've been helping businesses solve problems through kind of an impact lens, but I really want to do more of that. I want to show people that it is a really useful and empowering tool to solve all kinds of different issues and just brings a completely different perspective. So I would like to be delivering much more consulting based projects in 2025. I'd also like to do more talking about impact because something I started doing towards the back end of last year was speaking on other people's platforms, which I hadn't done before, running a lot more masterclasses myself. And I have really loved finding out that my message resonates with
Mm.
a new audience and seeing people have a little bit of a light bulb moment for themselves that actually they can be known for having an impact, and it doesn't matter whether their turnover is this big or this big, because the quality of what they're doing is what's truly important. So I would love to be able to take that message to new audiences. I just love talking.
Oh, I think it's such an important part of any business, and I think it's definitely something you need to get the message out there because I think there's still this thing. It's all to do with reviews and testimonials, and it really isn't because that's
Mhm.
part of it, but it's much, much deeper than that. So, if you've been listening to today's episode and you want to know more about the work that Rachel does, we are going to make sure that her details are in the show notes, and we will put a link to her LinkedIn and her website so you can connect up with her and find out more about the work that she does. Thank you for joining me today. It's been really enlightening talking to you about this because, as I said at the very beginning of the podcast, it's quite a niche thing. But actually, what you can do is you can help any business really escalate their services and their impact, and help them stand above their competitors, which is what we all need, really, isn't it? At the end of the
That's
day.
absolutely right. I just love the work I do. And I think that's
Yeah.
just the privilege of being self-employed, doing something that you love, being able to help other people and having a positive impact yourself. So thank you so much for inviting me to talk to you today. I have loved every minute.
Oh, thank you. And what a great message to end on. So thank you very much, Rachel, and I wish you continued success with your business.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie.